I watched on Hockey Central today as they talked to Gerard Gallant, and of course, today before going to work, I wanted to discuss Vegas because it is at that stage. We're 33 games into the season. They've won 22 of them. They've lost 9, and 2 of them are overtime losses. 46 points, regulation or overtime wins. So they have 20 of those. So only 2 of their wins are in shutouts or shootouts. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. They've won their last 3. Here's the key stat: at home, they're 14-2-1. On the road, they're 8-7-1. As long as they're one game above 500, they can just play 500 from here. And as long as they're winning at that pace at home, they'll get home ice advantage in the playoffs. Versus the East, they have 6 wins, 5 losses, 2 overtime losses. Versus the West, 16 wins, 4 losses. Since the bulk of your schedule is against the West, and you're deadly at home, if you're a Vegas fan right now, you have to feel very good about their chances to make the playoffs and potentially do something when they get there. But it's a question that people keep asking themselves, and I even heard it being said on Hockey Central today. How? And Nick Kiprio said there's no way this can continue, and he didn't mean it as an insult. It's just it can't continue. The answer provided to him by Coach Gerard Gallant was simple. There are so many players that can hurt you. All 4 lines are capable, but the top 9. And the statement from Doug McLean was, looking at this top 9, it's not bad. David Perron is a top 6 forward on almost any team. Eric Howla was, third line in Minnesota, absolutely had the second line potential. James Neal is a goal scorer. Jonathan Marchessault had 30 goals last season. Riley Smith had a down year last year, but he's been a 20 goal scorer multiple times before that. Carlson didn't get the opportunity in Columbus that he's getting now in Vegas, but he had shown himself to be a very defensively responsible forward. I think when they initially made this draft, I think Cody Eakin was set to be the number 2 center, and Carlson would have been third. Eakin is having a better year for Vegas right now than he had last year in Dallas. Last year in Dallas was brutal. So obviously there was something seen by Vegas scouts that they said he'll get through this. This is a bad stretch for him. He'll be better next year. Brandon Leipsic brought in. I don't know that we expected all these assists from this kid, but he's done it. Alex Tuck from Minnesota has looked like a stroke of genius. Absolutely. If they had drafted Dumba, they wouldn't have had Tuck. If they had drafted, say, Vatanen from Dallas, or not Dallas, from Anaheim, they wouldn't have Shea Theodore. This blue line, McNabb and Schmidt. Schmidt looks fantastic. Washington made a huge mistake not protecting him. I don't care who else you would have had to expose. Schmidt's fantastic. Englund and Theodore. Weird matching, and those two work. Now, again, I know this is usually in a blender, and these are just from daily face-off, but Englund is playing the best hockey of his career. Easily. In my eyes, he's playing the best hockey of his career. Shea Theodore is becoming that player that Anaheim drafted. They knew what they were getting. He was projected to be in their top 6 this year, but Anaheim has so much in terms of defense that they could afford to do this. And John Merrill from New Jersey, he was a forgotten man there. And, that Miller kid they got from Boston, not bad. I'm still not happy about Colin Miller being the one that went from Boston, because I believe then and I believe now that Miller would have been a top 4 guy in Boston. And they could have moved somebody else out. The idea that McQuaid is still a Bruin and Miller isn't kind of makes my brain twitch a little bit. That of the Millers that left, it was Colin that left, not Kevin. Kind of makes me twitch a little bit. So people are saying, I had no idea he was this good. I did. You can look back to any videos from last year, and outside of the one video where I felt he should have got suspended, outside of that reckless play, I never had a bad word to say about Miller. And in net, you got Marc-Andre Fleury, a guy with some Stanley Cup rings of his own, and Malcolm Subban, a top draft pick who was abandoned by the Bruins and has since then been fantastic. And for anybody who's wondering, it's one of those short-term games for long-term pain that Boston shows here. So when they let go of Subban, I wasn't upset. I'm still not. But 2 or 3 years from now, this really could haunt the Bruins. Because Rask, while he's been playing better lately, is no longer the Tuukka Rask that won the Vezina. Hudobin is never going to be a top-notch starter in the NHL. He's good. He can be a 1B. He's not a 1A. If Subban turns out to be that guy who can be a 1A, if he can realize that potential in Vegas and eventually be Fleury's replacement, it is a good move short term that stabs Boston fans right in the heart long term. Miller does it now. Love to have Miller back on that blue line. And I say that despite the good blue line that exists in Boston. The biggest part here is, and you look at this fourth line, you got Lindbergh from the Rangers, Bellemare from the Flyers, Nosek from Detroit. There's no player in this roster that you can look at and say is an also ran, or is a guy, well, he's just in the league because of expansion. He wouldn't be there otherwise. They pulled a number of really good players out of other organizations. And I've said this before. The whole idea of expansion has changed. You no longer get either a team of old cast-offs or a team of young players that are B-level prospects. And that's what you had with every single expansion before this one. At least dating back to San Jose's. It is quite the roster they got here. And in terms of whether or not it's something they can look at long term, the question was asked of Gallant today. What if James Neal is leveraged? What if Marchessault is leveraged and George McPhee comes to him and says, look, we're not going to sign these guys long term. I'm going to try to see what I can get for them. Gallant said he'd accept it and do what you got to do. And in the interview with Gerard Gallant, I have to say Florida's biggest mistake ever was firing that guy. What a great guy. What a great, humble, well-spoken coach he is. And I to this day don't understand what Florida was doing other than just a reactionary thing like, well, we've got to do something, we're losing. And it was a bungled move by ownership. They told Tom Rowe, go fire him. And he's left at the roadside. And they also pointed something else out today. So he goes up against Florida, the team that fired him. And he played Malcolm Subban. He played the backup. And they said that shows that he was looking at this and going, well, I'll put in the backup. I'll put in Fleury the next night. He wasn't trying to stick it to Florida. He wasn't trying to beef up the lineup, get Fleury in there, and we're going to beat them up. Because he doesn't look at it that way. And the Vegas players may not look at it that way either. The chip on their shoulder is one of teams left us exposed or traded us off so they wouldn't lose something else. Let's show them just how good we are. And at home, they're really, really deadly. That's twice now they've come back from 2-0 down in 1 games. I'm trying to think of the last time I can remember seeing a team that every time they were losing, I go, I'll believe it when I see it, is like the Detroit Red Wings with Yzerman, Colorado with Sakic, like, and this team doesn't have a Sakic or an Yzerman. It doesn't need it at this stage. In the playoffs, you need that kind of player. And I do think that in terms of how they're going to do in the playoffs, it could be a very different experience. But just the fact that we're talking about the playoffs and it's December 20th is remarkable. This is a remarkable time to be a fan of the Vegas Golden Knights. Of hockey in general. And it is a team right now that looks keen on winning that division. And I have no doubt in my mind they're the best coached team. There's no panic. When they were down 2-0 against Tampa last night, at no point did it look like they panicked, they changed their game. No, everything stayed the same. Just stick to the plan. There's no, oh God, we're losing. We have to start taking crazy risks we don't have to take. It's not a big deal. We're only down by 2. The adage still proves true that the most dangerous lead in the NHL is 2-goal lead. Because teams can sit back. Teams can relax. Teams can say, all right, well, we're up by 2. We're good. It's no truer than against these guys. You get up by 2 on Vegas, yeah, you're done. And it sounds weird for me to say it. But if you get up on these guys by 2 goals, odds are you're probably going to lose. And I don't know why any more than anybody else. But I do know that that top 9 is not the worst top 9 in the NHL. And despite the hockey news about 3 weeks ago, the magazine I got from them, where they rated the top 6 defensemen in the NHL, and they rated this top 6 as the worst in the NHL, it's not, though. It's coached to the point where it's one of the best. Their goal differential right now is 14. Yeah, they lay a couple of eggs here and there, and it does mean their goal differential isn't as high as it would be otherwise for a team that's 13 games above 500. But the fact that we're only talking about, like, occasionally, once in a while they'll have a bad game, Remember when 4 of their goalies were hurt? And no, like, this is insane that we're having this discussion. That a Vegas team that was without both of these goalies, and then the replacement for these two got hurt right away, and they're still 22-9-2. Just think for a minute about if they'd had Fleury or Subban during their rough stretch, when they were allowing a bunch of goals with Legacy in net. Imagine if Fleury had been in net, how much better this record could be. In terms of the greatest stories in hockey history, Vegas is definitely in that category and in that conversation, no matter what they do from here. 22 wins is right about what a lot of people thought they'd get for the year. 28, I think, is what I had them at. 28 or 30? I don't remember. I remember I came in with a total that was not bad. I think I had them at like 67 or 70 points. And I had people saying, that might be a bit high. But yeah, that's probably about right. It's going to be really, really low. And with 13 games above 500, that means if they played 500 hockey from here, they end up with 95 points. They make the playoffs. They absolutely make the playoffs. And it's crazy to think that all they have to do from here is just coast. But because they're coached by Gallant, because the team is put together like this, they're not going to coast. There's no true number 1 sniping defenseman. There's no true star forward here. And it makes them harder to play. Because you don't have to key on one guy. You don't have to worry about that one guy that can hurt you. And honestly, while everybody talks about Tavares, and now we all agree Tavares likely stays with the New York Islanders because they're going to get their new building and there's some stability there and the franchise isn't going to move. Just imagine if you added a Tavares-like center here. If you added a superstar center right here, these guys could be Stanley Cup champions. Remember when the owner said 3 years will be Stanley Cup champs? Everybody laughed. I don't know how many people are laughing right now. Maybe Foley was on something. Maybe there's some magical formula that only he and George McPhee know, and they haven't shared it with the world, and it's one that gets you Stanley Cups right away. Maybe Seattle can replicate it when they get their team. It's going to be interesting to see. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, though, about this topic. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through and you just happened upon it. And hey, how many points do these guys end up with? If I had to ballpark it right now, I'd say 105. So that's 10 more games above 500 than they are right now. And the funny thing is, that total's lower than what this projects out to. That's scary. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.